Hello guys, welcome back. My name is Nathan, and today I'm going to be doing my almost final Seattle Kraken expansion draft predictions. Now, with the expansion draft pretty much 20 days away, we have a lot of different trade rumors, a lot of different ideas of what the Seattle Kraken could look like for their first roster in franchise history. But what trades and what moves and what picks do I see the Seattle Kraken making, and what do I see their roster looking like on day one? Watch till the end for the entire expansion draft predictions and all the picks, all the trades, and hit that subscribe button if you're new. 60% of the people watching the videos are not subscribed, so subscribe for daily hockey content. And if you like the Kraken, if you like hockey, this is the place to be. Now grab some popcorn, get some soda, whatever you need to do, because today's video is an absolute banger. In the past, with the Seattle expansion videos, we've gone through the forwards, the defense, the goaltending to assemble the potential Seattle Kraken roster. But for today, we have something majorly different. We're going to be including actual trades in today's video that not just factor into the expansion draft, but the actual roster that we will see for Seattle, because there will be a lot of trades around this expansion draft with teams wanting to trade players that could have been exposed, Seattle taking on contracts, Seattle taking on picks. There's going to be a lot of different moves made and a lot of interesting trades that Seattle will have to make to get creative and build really the best team they can for their first season. Now, we got a lot of trades to talk about today when it comes to the forward group, the defense group, the Seattle's potential draft picks. There is a lot to cover here, but we're just going to start off with the trades that actually relate to the forward group itself, and we're going to start with a pretty huge one, this time involving the Nashville Predators and the Seattle Kraken. For our first trade to announce in today's video, the Nashville Predators will make a huge deal, already giving up Victor Arvidsson to get some protection from the expansion draft and kind of start their rebuild. This will accelerate that as well. Now, for the actual trade details on this huge deal, for the Nashville Predators, they will force Seattle to pick Ryan Johansson. They will also receive a 2022 third-round pick in exchange. And to the Seattle Kraken, they will get Ryan Johansson, Calle Jarnkrok, and Rocco Grimaldi, adding some major forward depth, also getting Ryan Johansson, but being forced to take that $8 million contract. They get two forwards who can make a pretty big impact, especially Jarnkrok, who could be on their top six, maybe even their first line to start out. They will have some major impacts, and Nashville gets rid of some major cap. They get rid of some major salary, which is what they're trying to do. They start the rebuild here. They get a pick in exchange. I think this could work for both teams, and especially for Seattle. They maximize value in a pretty bad Nashville Predators situation. But now we can go on to the second trade to announce today between the Philadelphia Flyers and the Seattle Kraken. This one's a lot less complex than the Nashville deal, but it still has major implications for both teams. But when it comes to the trade details, the Philadelphia Flyers will force the Seattle Kraken to take on the Jakub Voracek deal. In exchange for Seattle, they will get Philadelphia's 2022 first-round pick. Not 2021, that one's 14th overall. And if they do trade that, it'd probably be in a Jack Eichel deal. But they get rid of that 2022 first-round pick, which for Philadelphia, for them at least, hopefully, it'll be a pretty low one, but they get rid of the Jakub Voracek deal to get some major cap space off the books. And even though Voracek is still a productive player, he's not what he used to be, and I don't think is worth $8 million for Philadelphia, but for Seattle, could be maybe a reclamation project. You bring in that cap, you get a 2022 first and a pretty good draft, and I think for Seattle, that works out pretty well. And for Philadelphia, if they're able to use that 2021 first to also get Jack Eichel, that could bring in some major success for that team. So I think it could work out for both teams involved here, and of course, Philadelphia's pick Seattle's pick from Philadelphia will end up being Jakub Voracek. But one last deal to announce in terms of the forward group for Seattle. This one's also a pretty big one in terms of cap and cap flexibility. This one involving the Tampa Bay Lightning and the Seattle Kraken. And when it comes to the trade details, the Tampa Bay Lightning will force the Seattle Kraken to take Tyler Johnson's contract, picking him in the expansion draft. In exchange for Seattle, they will receive forward Taylor Radish, forward prospect from Tampa, and a 2023 second round pick there. So they do get a second round pick. It is quite a bit ahead of time, but it is a second. And you get Taylor Radish, who's a pretty good forward. He's 23 years old, had a great AHL campaign, and could be a middle six forward for Seattle in the future, maybe even next year, who knows. But they bring in the Tyler Johnson contract. That's $5 million for the next 3 seasons off the books for Tampa, which could allow them to sign guys like Blake Coleman, Barclay Goodrow, maybe even David Savard potentially. There's a lot of potential there, and I think it will work out for both teams as well. And for Seattle, you add Tyler Johnson, who grew up around the area. You get Taylor Radish in a second round pick. Not too bad for just $5 million. But now with the trades for the forward group out of the way, do not worry, there's some trades for the defense. But we're now going to move on to the Seattle Kraken First line for the first season of their franchise in 2021-2022. This is how the first line, I think, for Seattle will end up looking like. Starting on the left wing for Seattle, I see Jason Zucker from the Pittsburgh Penguins, centered by Ryan Johansson of the Nashville Predators, and on the right wing, you have Vladimir Tarasenko of the St. Louis Blues. Zucker is an interesting one. He makes $5.5 million this year, had a really bad season by all means for Pittsburgh, and I think that's a guy that Pittsburgh might just leave exposed. They might not trade him to get off the books, but they'll just see what happens, and that cap space could be allocated to get guys like Jared McCann back, and maybe add another piece this offseason. We'll see, but I think Pittsburgh might let him go. Then you have Johansson, of course, in the Johansson trade, and Vladimir Tarasenko, who makes $7.5 million. He's been in trade rumors quite a bit recently, but I don't really see many teams wanting to give up big assets for him. He's been pretty injured these past few years, just hasn't really been the same. He's getting up there in age, but I think for Seattle could be this project to maybe get him back to form, and if he is back in form, he could be their William Karlsson story, where he comes out of nowhere and is just absolutely amazing again. With Tarasenko, though, the talent is still there, and who knows what happens with the Kraken. But now we're going to move on to the second line. It still is a very competent top six. Even though that first line might be lacking a little bit in the centers are still pretty good at the second line, I think, too. Now, starting with the left wing, of course, from that Johansson trade, Cal Yarncroc, I think, will start on the first second line left wing. A pretty good spot for him, and he's a really underrated winger. Then on the center side of things, you have Mikael Backlund from the Calgary Flames. This is a guy that they might have to end up exposing. I think it really depends on how much they want Mangiapane. I would rather protect Mangiapane at this point. He's a super underrated, super important part of that forward group, but Calgary is likely losing somebody big. And then you have Jakub Voracek, of course, in the Voracek trade on that second line right wing, who will be a major force there. I mean, he is still pretty competent, and even though he is overpaid and that contract isn't the greatest, I think he will still be worthy of a second line spot and could be pretty good in a lesser role with Seattle. Next up, though, going to the third line, and as we've seen with a lot of Stanley Cup winners recently, the bottom six can be almost as important as that top six, and I think bottom six-wise for Seattle, they're looking pretty solid, and that third line I have some really big things for, or some really big hopes for. Now, when it comes to the third line for Seattle, I think on the left wing, they will have Jesper Fast from the Carolina Hurricanes. Pretty solid ad. He doesn't have the best contract in the world, but he's an ad that I think for Carolina and Seattle, it could be beneficial for Fast to just go to Seattle and work on that third line, centered by Alexander Kerfoot, who will likely be the guy that's majorly exposed by Toronto, the guy that I think Seattle will be the most likely to get. He's a great center, good third line option too, has some versatility, can play basically every single position, every single spot in the penalty kill, the power play, has a lot of options, and I think Seattle will definitely like that. And then you go on to the right wing, and for me right now, of course, you got the Tyler Johnson trade. I think this is where Tyler Johnson likely suits up for the Seattle Kraken. On that third line right wing, you got some great options around him like Alexander Kerfoot, but he will likely be the main guy driving play and driving offense on that third line. But now moving on to the fourth line for the Seattle Kraken. This is also super important because they'll likely have a lot of extra forwards to choose from that could maybe suit up on that fourth line, but I think we'll see a lot of the extra forwards as well suit up throughout the season. But for the actual fourth line for Seattle, what I'm thinking here is Valeri Nichushkin on the left wing for the Colorado Avalanche, or from the Colorado Avalanche, centered by Brett Howden from the New York Rangers, and Rocco Grimaldi from the Ryan Johansson trade. He'll be a part of things and will be a major part of that bottom six. I think in terms of that fourth line is the biggest lock, I would say. But then when you go into the extra forwards, there's a lot of options here too. You have Jona Gajovic from the Vancouver Canucks, Rasmus Asplund from the Buffalo Sabres, Abi Cabell from the Philadelphia Flyers, Radolf Balcers from the San Jose Sharks, who could be on that fourth line potentially, Christian Fischer from the Arizona Coyotes, Blake Lizotte from the LA Kings, and Daniel Sprong from the Washington Capitals. That is your final 2022 Seattle Kraken forward group, and honestly, with the trades involved, there are some major weapons on that team, and especially if the health goes their way, if Tarasenko gets back to form, that could be a pretty competent forward group. Nothing that'll be amazing or anything, but it can get the job done. And now we go onto the defense, and this is where the bulk of the trades involved for the Seattle Kraken, I think, will come from. Not even just in terms of what Seattle's defense will look like, but just the guys that might be just kept by other teams. Now, the first trade I want to say that I want to show that I think has major implications for the Seattle expansion draft is this Josh Manson trade involving the New Jersey Devils and the Anaheim Ducks. There's not a lot of teams right now that can afford really to add another defenseman on their team and still be expansion draft viable, but New Jersey is is one of those guys, one of those teams, and I think they might want to take that next step going forward. They want to add some defense. Josh Manson could be a part of that. Now, when it comes to this trade, of course, with Josh Manson in Anaheim, he would likely be the guy that Seattle takes if he was to be exposed, and he probably would be, because I don't think they would want to get rid of a guy like Lindholm or a guy like Fowler or a guy like a Josh Mahora. So I think they'll end up exposing Josh Manson, but instead they would trade him, and in this deal, New Jersey would get Josh Manson and Nicolas Deslauriers. In exchange, Anaheim will get a 2021 second-round pick, that being the Islanders, a 2022 third-round pick, and Jesper Boquist. But there's a lot of other trades that also factor into the expansion draft. The first one that factors into the Seattle Kraken specifically is this deal between the Colorado Avalanche and the Seattle Kraken. This one involves Colorado, and to Colorado, they're able to keep Ryan Graves in the expansion draft, and Seattle gets a 2021 first-round pick, 28th overall from Colorado. And even if Johnson were to have a no-move clause, you'd still have Girard, you'd still have Makar, and you'd still have Taves in terms of the guys that are protected. Graves is the odd man out, but he's still a big part of that defense, and I think Colorado will try their hardest to keep him on the team, as they should. When it comes to other deals, you have from the LA Kings and Seattle Kraken, this one to keep Matt Roy in exchange, the Seattle Kraken will get a 2022 second-round pick, that from Seattle, and a 2022 third-round pick, that being from the Pittsburgh Penguins. Now, there just continues to be more deals with the defense, this now coming from the Minnesota Wild and the Seattle Kraken. This one, of course, to keep Matt Dumba, keep that top four intact, and when it comes to Seattle, they will get Damon Hunt, a defensive prospect, a 2021 second-round pick, and a 2021 fifth-round pick. But that is not it yet. We have one last trade for the defense. This one is different. For the New York Islanders and the Seattle Kraken, they will have a deal to work with where Seattle actually brings on Nick Leddy, or actually basically forces Nick Leddy to be on Seattle. For the Islanders, they will select the Kraken to force pick Nick Leddy in the expansion draft. In exchange, Seattle will get a 2021 third-round pick and a 2022 fifth-round pick. Those are the trades now for the defense group. So let's get into how they actually look for the Seattle Kraken. Now, there was a lot of trades there and a lot of picks going to Seattle, so they'll have a lot to work with. And this defense could have been a lot better if they just picked the guys and saw what happened. But I think Seattle will kind of be a little bit more of a middle team where they will, yes, make some moves to be better now, but also bring in some great picks and some great prospects to bolster that future, which I think is the right decision. But when it comes to the defense for the Seattle Kraken, in year one, on day one, for the expansion draft, for the first pairing for the Seattle Kraken, the faces of the defense for the Seattle Kraken. Starting off on the left side, it'll be Nick Leddy from the New York Islanders, and on the right, you have Dylan DeMello from the Winnipeg Jets. I think this pairing is really, really solid as a franchise starter. Nick Leddy isn't great or anything, but he can still provide some great offensive value, and defensively has taken some bigger strides these past couple of years. And then you have Dylan DeMello, who's still one of the more underrated defensemen in the league, might get exposed by Winnipeg just for the sheer fact that Logan Stanley has basically forced himself into that protect category, and Dylan DeMello will probably be on his way out there, but a great, I think, overall defenseman. Might not be a top pairing guy, but still, I think, could survive in the waters in that position. Then you have the second pairing here, which is honestly really, really solid as well. You got Jamie Oleksiak on the left side from the Dallas Stars, and Will Butcher from the New Jersey Devils. Butcher's the interesting one here. We know what Oleksiak is, but Butcher's had some interesting years. Back in his peak, a couple of years back from New Jersey, he was an excellent offensive, transitional defenseman. And I think Seattle, there has been some injuries, there has been some health there for Butcher, but if they can get him back to form, he could be worthy of a top four spot and could be one of the better puck-moving defensemen on the group. And then you have the bottom pairing here, which I think provides a lot of value as well. You have Carson Soucy from the Minnesota Wild on that left side. Great overall two-way defensive guy that's Minnesota just might have to lose in the expansion draft. And you also got Gustav Forsling from the Florida Panthers, who had a fantastic year for Florida. Great overall, under-the-radar, young defenseman, who I think on the third pairing, especially for Seattle, could do some excellent things. And then you got the extras on defense. Caleb Jones of the Edmonton Oilers is a no-brainer if he's available. Jeremy Lauzon from the Boston Bruins, I think, will also be a part of that. You got Dean Kukan from the Columbus Blue Jackets, and Gustav Lindstrom from the Detroit Red Wings, rounding out that defense group. And there you have it, the year one defense for Seattle. But now we can go into arguably the most interesting and important position for the Seattle Kraken, and that, of course, is the goaltending. Now, I don't know if we're going to see any trades involving the goaltending group, but I do think we'll see some excellent additions made by the Seattle Kraken. And when it comes to the goaltending for year one in Seattle, I think the Seattle Kraken will end up picking as their starter from the Montreal Canadiens, Jake Allen. Now, Jake Allen as a starter, there might be some concerns there. He's been great as a backup recently, but he's going to be thrust into as the expansion draft starter there. But I still think there's potential for Jake Allen to do pretty well. He's not going to be a Marc-Andre Fleury. He's not going to set the world on fire. But I think as a league average starter, there is potential for Jake Allen to do that. And under that defense, under that forward group, if he's just league average or even above league average, Seattle could end up making the playoffs, and I think he'll be a big part of that team. When it comes to the other two goaltenders, though, I think it might just be a switch between these two guys in terms of the backup. But I got Philip Gustafsson of the Ottawa Senators. This is a hard one. Maybe they end up leaving Joey Decourt as the guy. Maybe they end up selecting him. But either one of those guys, I think, could be picked by Seattle. And then you have Malcolm Subban from the Chicago Blackhawks, who I think will be on his way out. He's a guy that had a pretty decent year for Chicago. Wasn't anything electric, but made some pretty good starts. And I think as a backup or a third goaltender, he's not the worst option in the world. Still fairly young and is pretty cheap as well with an $800K contract. But that is pretty much it for the Seattle Kraken roster expansion draft. Now, when it comes to this actual team and how I think they would do, this is probably the best Seattle Kraken team I've drafted or put together, mostly because, again, trades are involved, and I could actually use trades to bolster this team now and for the future. And I think the trades are going to be the most important thing for Seattle. You saw how valuable it was for Vegas, how they were, and they ended up trading for guys like William Karlsson and traded for futures and traded for draft picks, and it ended up bolstering that team into what it is now. I think Seattle should absolutely do the same. Just be smart with the cap space, be smart with those picks, try to get as much as humanly possible, maybe even bring on some contracts for some value. That's what Vegas did, and I think that's what Seattle should do as well. Try to be as smart as possible with those trades, and I think these trades actually will end up setting them off pretty well for now and in the future. I don't think Seattle's going to light the world on fire like Vegas did, but I think this could be a team that makes the playoffs, especially in that very weak West Division, or I guess Pacific Division now. But I think this team has a lot of potential. It might not be a team that wins the Stanley Cup, but I would say with this current team right now, they're making the playoffs, and they have potential to do so, especially with maybe Dave Haxtell being a more defensive guy. I think it kind of fits that team in general, and I think the team will do pretty well to start off. I have hopes of that at least. I think Seattle starting off would be amazing for hockey, but let's see what the Seattle Kraken do. It should be a very interesting next few weeks, but this is my Seattle expansion mock draft predictions for the Seattle Kraken. But that'll be it for today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed, make sure you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and hit that notification bell if you haven't already. And if you enjoyed, make sure you comment down below what do you agree and disagree with my mock predictions for the Seattle Kraken expansion draft. Who do you guys see the Seattle Kraken taking from your favorite NHL team? And how do you see the Seattle Kraken doing in year one? Let me know all your thoughts down in the comments. Make sure you share this video with your friends. Get the word of the Seattle Kraken out there. And make sure you click on this card for all of my Seattle expansion draft predictions and videos all in one playlist. My name is Nathan. Thank you so much for watching, and if you did notice already, I'm back to my usual camera and not using my phone, which is a great upgrade. It's a great upgrade, so that's amazing. But thank you guys so much for all the support lately during the playoffs. It's been amazing, and let's keep it going for the next month, which is going to be huge with the draft, the expansion draft, and everything. See you guys then, and see you in the next one. Goodbye.